Okay.
This event is about how to sort of the best practice for creating virtual events. I call them these Startup Grind mentor events, back to the hashtags. So best practice for virtual events, and then share best practices for creating virtual events in Startup Grinds Bevy system. The system is, the system itself is very easy to use, but it's also, they got some possibilities when it comes to formatting and so on. And then discuss also with you possibilities and strategies for virtual events, and then look at event formats, because Zoom is one that we're using right now, but there are some other tools out there, so I'd like to hear from you if you tried something else. I was in a GoToMeeting webinar early today, and then sort of crowdsourcing a little bit of ideas from all of you when it comes to the virtual event future, because we have had VR for quite some time, but kind of never took off. And to be honest, I haven't seen VR taking off much more in this situation. Now we're still doing this kind of flat Zoom 2D and all that, but where we will go. My experience with the virtual events, well, we did our first virtual event in March this year with Kevon from Toasty. And we thought, well, this is the first event, so let's call it, how to run highly engaging virtual event, effective virtual sessions. Kevon, though, being an expert in it, so it got us kind of a flying start on it. We did the April event with AWS. We did an event last week, which we also then did a panel. We're actually doing an event on Thursday this week together with Microsoft. It's a Microsoft event, but we are partnering up with them, and we're actually using Microsoft Teams for that event. And that kind of gives us the challenge to test that. But it's a Microsoft event, it's not a Startup Grind event. The event after that will be a Zoom meeting on 27th of May. But my first events I actually did back in 2016 on GoToWebinar. I did 2 events as part of Google's Digital Academy in Sweden. So I've tried this for some time, and I would say that the technology now, the way Zoom works, is much, much better than back in 2016. A little bit by myself and Jens. Well, I got a Master of Science in Civil Engineering. It took me a few years because I did my military service at the same time, so I've done both. And then I always loved tech, so my first job was working with 3-dimensional models, 3D Studio Max, which still exists. And then I moved to Hong Kong with the dot-com boom. That's when I got to know Margaret. So Margaret and I have been working together since '98. And then I worked with management consultant in China, India for 2002 to 2009. And then I worked for, basically I was head of a mission for the Swedish Foreign Ministry for 3.5 years, which for an engineer is quite a different thing to do. And then I was back in Sweden. I did Google's Digital Academy. We did 22 seminars, physical seminars around in Sweden, how to use digital tools. And then I did 2 webinars. That's the webinars then. And then since 2016, running Ripple Effect in Hong Kong, Startup Grind since the end of 2016. So IT and tech has always been around since '85 when I got my first computer. And today I'm all 100% tech and business. I also do these digital coffee videos. I put them on LinkedIn. I've done 23 of them so far. Small videos about things that makes your life better. Because my thinking is that, the time it takes for you to drink a cup of coffee, you can do that and watch like a 2-3 minute video about something like Calendly, how it helps you. So that's why I got into making these videos for Startup Grind. And I'm also going to help Bevy to make some videos about Startup Grind using it. So you can therefore basically ask me anything. I'm happy to do that. Let's focus today on this, but if you have any other questions about business in Asia and all that, just drop me a line. So best practice for creating virtual events. So let's start with just a timeline and make kind of time your friend, because you always, creating events can be fun, but it also can be a bit stressful. Right today, I found out, and Jasmine and I are going to look at it later, I had difficulty suddenly logging on to Zoom for some reason 10 minutes before. That becomes stressful. It might be a new feature in Zoom. We have to find out. So what I like to say is kind of the goal to make amazing virtual events is to kind of say, where in the future would I like to create my Zoom event? And we're going to use Zoom as the example here because we use Zoom for majority in Startup Grind. And I have some reasons also why we probably should stay with that platform. So how long between today and the event you want to make? Well, enough time for marketing and preparation for the people around you to also act and react. So how much should that be in days and weeks? Well, let's get back to that, and I'll show you a little bit how to think about it. So today we're going to make certain decisions that will impact and affect our future event. So we have got things to do in the middle, and then of course things that you want. And I would say this is kind of the important part, because sometimes we just get into running virtual events because we should do it, but we don't really, what do I want to get out of it? The clearer you are on things that you want, the easier it is going to be for you to plan out what to do, things to do in between today and the actual event. Because depending on what you want, you will see that maybe it's possible or not possible to do in the timeline that you have, and also looking at the resources. So Hjelte's event on Saturday about team is very important. How big is your team? How much can you split up the tasks? What knowledge do you have in your team so that you can get help to do all of these things? So that's why we're here today. So let's set a goal. So things that you want. So I've been running Startup Grind together with Keith and Margaret since 2016. So if we look at the very, very sort of high end of what people want, yeah, you want to have a star speaker on stage. And Jan, who was previous APAC director for APAC, he managed to get Gary Vee to come to Hong Kong, which was a great event. And I've seen posts on LinkedIn, until recently about it. So that particular event, with all the preparation, Jan flying to New York to get Gary to come here to Hong Kong, still pays off. We can see what Chris Jano in Melbourne does. Chris creates podcasts, which are on Apple Podcasts from his previous events. So he just takes the audio from his events and then he puts them online. And he can then kind of recreate his event and repurpose it, and it has a longer life than just that particular hour and a half of the event. So that's kind of, say, with like star things, like planning for the very future. If you are going to have a speaker, yes, you can take out the recording, you make a podcast. What we do in Hong Kong, yeah, we are doing some post-production on the videos. So basically, we're taking the video recordings, and that's why also Jasmine and I will talk about like what can we do in Zoom, which is not on this event, but we'll do a future one, because we want to have a good recording of everybody, everything in Zoom, so that we can later cut it into a nice video that we put on YouTube. And then we might be able to use that also for marketing purposes, showing our partners and sponsors, hey, this is what an event looks like. Then you have the other things you want. Yes, helping your community to go through and to work with the Startup Grind ethos, give first, make friends, help others. Because the big thing here is we do this and then we build a local community. So I would say the things that we really want, of course, it's support and build a community. Things that we can add on this gives other assentment for what we want to do, how to plan this out. So what is then best for your community? Is it the best thing to broadcast a message, or to do virtual events when you have both, maybe a learning part, the fireside chat, and then sort of the exchange? You can have the breakout rooms, or you can use something like Toasty or Remote that you create as a second part of the event when people can interact. I, of course, enjoy events where I learn something, but I also know that I will meet new friends online. When you broadcast a message, the event I went to earlier today, it was basically broadcasting because there was a written Q&A session, but I couldn't really. So what did I left during the Q&A because I wasn't meeting anybody. It was a good factual event, but I didn't meet any new people. So I would say, to make a great event, to have that networking optional, because not everybody wants to be in networking. So we just leave them, they can leave after the fireside chat, but it's good to have it as an option. So let's take community building and see what decisions we should make. So if we take a standard fireside chat, Zoom web meeting like this one, Zoom web meeting as the first part. I'm sharing my screen. You can on your side choose how much if you want to see me or the PowerPoint. And then we can do Zoom breakout rooms. So you then split people up randomly in groups, and you may or may not give them some task when they go into the rooms. It's very simple. The pros for that is one platform, so there's only one login, there's one link, there's one customer journey. They don't have to go in between two different systems. It's very social, and you have the breakout rooms. The negative one is that there is no Q&A, and I can see now the chat is popping up every so often, and I guess Jasmine is going to wave to me if there's somebody asks a question, but there is no Q&A function which is separate from the chat. You can use Slido together with this, which we did at one of our events, and then people can ask questions from their mobile phones, so they can watch and then type out their mobile phones. It's less control, so we can let you in, but it doesn't prevent us or you to start to play loud, well, not loud music because we can mute you, but you can show images in your, that's what they call Zoom bombing. So we have less control rather than a webinar. A bit more work to record. So we are still learning here how to record these events the best way. But you can still take the recording, the audio, and create a podcast. There's nothing stopping you to do that. So let's take a look. We take a little more advanced event. So this was a fireside chat. So you could use Zoom webinar for that. And then you can use Toasty, which is a Hong Kong startup that allows people to be automatically grouped into rooms depending on their preferences, or Remo. Come back to Remo. The pro and con here, you have a lot of control with Zoom webinar. Only the participant, the panelists can be seen. You can see a list of people, but they can't really interact. Yes, they can put stuff in the chat, but you can also block the chat. There's a built-in Q&A, which is good. There are some panelist functions. It's very social to move people to Toasty or Remo, which is our social platforms. And you can integrate Slido with Zoom webinar. So basically, London did this 2 weeks ago when they interviewed the founder of ARM, the processor in the phones. And that was a great experience because the questions were listed next to the picture, very nicely integrated. So Slido and Zoom, and you know all Startup Grind directors have a Slido account. You should just email Ford that you want to have it activated, and then you can try on Slido. The negative is there's no breakout rooms in Zoom webinars. So you cannot do that. People have to jump between Zoom and the other system, Zoom to Remo. You will lose people. There is no social in Zoom webinar in that sense. But Zoom webinar, if you have Gary Vee again on stage, not a problem because Zoom webinar can handle anything. So what if we choose not to use Zoom? Well, we wouldn't advise it, but it is possible. So this fireside chat, we actually did run it in Remo. And the reason was we dared to do that was that CFTE, who Janos is working for, uses Remo for their educational purposes. So you often say that you need a tech person to run the event for you, which is highly recommended to have this tech person like Jasmine is running the event for me now. So Janos was actually running Remo for us, and that made it much easier. So what is then Remo? Well, Remo is quite interesting. It's basically a number of tables, and this is us 2 hours after the event finished. We were still, me and Bharat, still having a discussion in the Startup Grind room. So there was one person sitting there at some table, but basically you have tables, they are like Zoom miniature rooms, you move around. And people love to network on it. The actual broadcast, which Janos is handling for us, is really nice. It got Q&A and all that stuff, but you really, the pros are, it's very social, it's great stage management, it's got a built-in Q&A, it is different and innovative, but there's no integration into Bevy, meaning that yes, you could have people RSVP for a ticket, but you have to manually get them into Remo. There is no app like Zoom, it's built into Chrome. So it's a learning curve for your audience. And you have people who want to be in Safari, doesn't work. People who want to be in Edge, doesn't work. So yeah, limits. And it's harder to build a community because you don't have the collective people getting into Bevy, and then you can't email them the same way as you do with a regular event with Zoom. So that's what I'm saying is like, yeah, you can, but I wouldn't advise for it, because community is not only the event, it's also the post event and the next event. So use Zoom. Live streaming. Well, that's a good question. So you could do live streaming, and you could today easily in Zoom webinar connect YouTube Live, Facebook Live, LinkedIn broadcasting. A question that I have, of course, is kind of, if you look at that, yeah, it's greater because you can have an audience in number, and you can show size. And it sounds good to partners and sponsors saying, hey, we're also broadcasting it live on YouTube. But the question is, do you have passive viewers or active viewers? Because we want to have a community. We don't want people to act passively or just watch. And how do you then get people from that broadcasted Zoom webinar into Toasty and Remo? Yeah, you could place the link on a slide and show it at the event, but you will probably lose a lot of people. And I would say that maybe you would actually steal viewers from yourself, people who would have gone into Zoom and register, which you like, and then they say, well, let's just watch it on YouTube, and then they never register, so that then they don't become part of the community. So, and there's no Bevy integration for the live part in sense of having a link. So yeah, can you do it? Sure. Is it good for you? Well, it depends on what do you want. Because if we want to build a community, we want to know the people who they are, so that they can come to also the next event and the next event. So what else do you need to do? Well, creating events, there's a lot from today. The first few days after you decided, let's do an event, you create the Bevy page, you set up you create your banners, you put it on LinkedIn, you put it on Facebook. Lots of work in the beginning. And there's a lot of work just before the actual event, sort of testing, making sure, like the day before. So I've created kind of a virtual event checklist, which is still in Word, and trying to capture all the different things we need to do. And we also created this kind of an Excel sheet in the middle, what the marketing we need to do before we decided and the last day. So on that particular last day, we will post in Twitter. Let's start, we're coming online in 4 or 5 hours. So all of that, we're going to make it available to you down the line. It's just making sure that it's as good as it gets. So that you can use these documents then to tell your team what to do, and then you can sort of share the knowledge, or you can put the knowledge in the Excel sheet and don't have to remember everything, and different people can do different things. Divide. Of course, comes back to also measuring, do you get what you want? I mean, yeah, we do first event, second event, third event, and I would say at the moment we've been trying Toasty, Remo, Zoom, webinar, meeting, and we're going to try Microsoft Teams on Thursday. We're learning. And so I can't conclusively say, one thing is better, but Zoom is great. But always ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? And then, of course, just adjust so you try to get it. So then there's the question, what is enough time? As I said, enough time for marketing preparation and for the people around you to act and react. So we have a few different things when it comes to time. First is Startup Grind technology. So when you create an event and you go to the Airtable and you paste that link, manage link there, Startup Grind community managers have to manually check that versus the calendar. I think we have 6 different licenses, 4 webinars, so 4 web meetings and then 2 webinars. And then they have to email it out. So there are some manual steps. So that will put a certain restraint. And yes, you can go online and sort of pre-check, are there any other events in my time zone? But the table is actually in the local time zone of the event. So you have to do a bit of arithmetic there. But do please give the startup community team enough time to do all these steps, because there are some manual steps. We shouldn't push it too hard. Secondly, your community. If you put your event too close, they might already be booked. So you spend all this time doing an event and they don't have time to attend. And thirdly, your team. if you do give some time between now and the event, then you can divide up the tasks. Otherwise, you will have to do all yourself because dividing up the tasks. So make sure to find that green date in the future that works with Startup Grind, tech, your community, and your team. And I would say 3 to 4 weeks. If you say, well, people don't, in my market, we only do this, we only need to market very shortly before, then I would say plan for it today, but start the marketing later. Just kick off the marketing if you need a week before because you don't want to do it but do the Startup Grind integration already 3 to 4 weeks before. You've got your time slot, you have everything set up, then it's easy. At the point where you say, now it's good for my market to market, then you do that, but you don't have to wait for the other things. That was my presentation on creating best practice virtual events.